Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verses 93 to 102. Deen needs educating and training of Momineen. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any question or query. Recap verses 1083 to 92. Some of the youths from Bani Israel responded to the call of Musa and Harun, while many others remained fearful of the consequences of retaliation by Pharaoh and his ruling junta against them. Allah has recognized this state of affairs in any human society which is organized based on non-being systems. Musa asked his people to have Iman, then have trust in the laws of Allah and submit to the laws of Allah in order to become Muslimin. We have gone through these details, and these are quite important to understand for us in today's world. This then occurred over many years. Allah guided Musa and asked him and his people to remain steadfast and focused on this path. They should make their homes as their qibla to carry out education and training in the system of Deen, so that when the opportunity arrives later, they are able to establish it quickly without wasting precious time. And that is an important point for us, that this is the time when the Deen does not exist anywhere, that we train ourselves, educate, and develop ourselves for the system of Deen. Bani Israel then left Egypt. Pharaoh and his army pursued them and got drowned in the sea. Pharaoh tried to announce his Iman in order to get a reprieve from his death, but it was declared to be too late. So those people who think that by reciting kalma right before their death, they are going to get reprieved, they are sadly mistaken, because over here Quran has made it clear once for all that it is not about uttering few words. It is about Iman and Saleh deeds over a long period of time and then working for the system of Deen by coming together. Pharaoh's body became saved and serves as a sign for mankind for the rest of time in Egypt. Let us go to the first verse for this presentation, 1093. Bani Israel progressed towards the system of Deen. I'll go to the meanings. This was the negative side of this program, i.e., the destruction of Pharaoh and his army and the release of Bani Israel from their tyrannical grip. Its positive and constructive aspect was this, that we established Bani Israel at such a place where there was an abundance of the means of sustenance, and in this way made them beneficiaries of pleasant and respectable risk. Over here, Quran has cut short the period between the time Bani Israel escaped Pharaoh and all the struggle they had in the desert of Sinai. And some of these details are covered in other verses in the Quran. We conferred on them these bounties, but their state remained such that they kept receiving wahi from different Anbiya, but they kept on creating differences with this. And this is important, that despite seeing the evidence of their escape from Pharaoh and the messenger of Allah guiding them, they still differed among each other because they were not fully concentrating on the importance of wahi from Allah. According to this way of theirs, they also have differences now with this wahi, the Quran. Hence, the decision in the matters in which they differ will not be able to be done using reasoning and evidence, because they are not prepared to listen to reasoning and evidence. Will happen at the time of that supreme revolution when their destruction takes place through your hands. And the Quran is addressing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions directly through this verse, and there is a lesson for us as of today. At that time, history will repeat itself, and the way in which the destruction of Pharaoh and his army took place in front of them, their destruction will take place in front of you. This is because the outcome of the wrong path is always destruction and ruin, whether it is Pharaoh who is treading on it or Bani Israel. Now let us look at slightly more detail on this verse. The system of Deen requires own piece of land to make a start. Here arrives the real purpose of Deen and its establishment. Any human system needs a piece of land on the planet which is totally free from any external influences and controls in order to establish itself under its own value system. And this verse makes it clear that without a piece of land, Deen cannot be practiced, Deen cannot be established. Those of us and many Muslims who are satisfied with this ritualistic sectarian Islam, they need to look through it and reflect on it in their own time and in the light of the Quran, that what they are doing is not part of Deen. And that is an important point over here. Having been freed from the chains of slavery of every kind imposed by Pharaoh and his people under the leadership of Musa, Bani Israel reached some area of land where they could now reflect on the wahi of Allah and its practical aspects. So it's not an emotional issue. It is an issue of practical aspects of life, that without Deen, there cannot be any peace in the world. And without establishing Deen, we cannot benefit from what is noted in the Quran and also cannot extend those benefits to wider mankind. We can never serve as a model for others. They had acquired some knowledge and understanding of Wahi when they resorted to education and training on a smaller scale, as noted earlier. The core team with developed selves became ready to figure out the details of the management and administration of this new system under the direct guidance of the Wahi of Allah. This had to be totally free from any man-made laws with which they were familiar from the recent past. So there was an uphill task for Hazrat Musa and Harun to provide education and training. They knew their past under Pharaoh, and some of them might have even appreciated that where they are now is better than what they were confronted with under Pharaoh. But still, as human nature is, as human beings want results very quickly. And over here, they had to go through a long period of time in the desert. The first obvious need is the availability of the means of sustenance, which needs to be arranged, and the main source is land or agriculture. Here the Quran has pointed to وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ, risk which was tayyib, i.e. good and nourishing, and also earned with respect and dignity, not by begging or as a charity, so that their physical energies remain at an optimum and is free from any negative psychological impacts. And that is a very important point to which the Quran has drawn our attention. And this aspect will get expanded as we go through the Quran through other verses. Never let differences arise among those who work for the establishment of the system of Deen. However, after mentioning risk, the Quran has directly gone to the problem of the arising of differences among them, despite the fact of their having gone through such an ordeal which should have made them better human beings. However, this could also refer to the conduct of the Jews at the time of Islam when they opposed the system of Deen, despite being the people of the book. The next part of the verse points to the fact that if Rububiyyat is opposed, then gradually the result of opposing it manifests the consequences, and the outcomes of those wrong deeds become established. This occurred at that time, and the opposition of the Jews was made ineffective, and the system of Deen became established. Here, the Quran provides instruction for us that by comprehending the laws of Allah and the permanent values, we acquire knowledge and empowerment, which, if utilized, can lead us towards success. Because the rising of differences means that we are not following the Quran. And if differences arise, we need to come to grip with this issue, this value, that Quran is here to remove the differences. That means those who think they have differences, they have to look into the Quran and see where they are going wrong. One important point we need to keep in mind that those who create differences despite the guidance of the Quran should be excluded ASAP, of course, politely and firmly. And I put down this point because in the establishment of the system of Deen, who run the affairs of the system of Deen, they must not let anyone get anywhere near that power, that position of power, which is working on behalf of Allah, who have any reservations, any differences which go against the Quran and for which there is no validity given in the Quran. Very obvious examples can be, for example, in the administration of justice. If they have different views and they want to favor someone, then obviously they cannot be anywhere near the system of Deen. In life, we need to clarify doubts and make well-informed decisions. And I'll go through the meanings. O nation being addressed, if you have any doubt or suspicion in this reality, which is in the Quran, which is sent down to you, and in which is stated how our law of requital has been functioning in the case of previous nations, then those people who have been possessors of the book of Allah previously, i.e., Jews and Christians, go and ask them whether these events which are described here are correct or not. There is a point over here where we have to be very careful as well that previous books of Allah are tampered with. We know they are not the original books. And we can see some glimpses of it where using the Quran, we can say that those appear to be some kind of a permanent value. For example, what you sow, so shall you reap. But overall, we have to be very careful in referring to it and trying to compare it with the Quran. After this, you will have the assurance that whatever has been explained from the direction of your Rabb is an established fact. Hence, when it is a fact, then why are you among those people who keep on creating situations to cause disputes for nothing? The constructive results of our efforts can never go unnoticed. So we go through some of the reflections on this verse 94. After presenting this account of Bani Israel to those opponents immediately confronting the Islamic system, the Quran returns to the fundamental issue of its own veracity of being haqq from the direction of Allah. It is obvious that thoughts will arise in the hearts of many as they arise even today, and we do witness this whether what is being put forward by the Quran is haqq or not. And this takes time. We have gone through this aspect previously as well. It is not just accepting Iman and then it becomes very firm. Quran, that is why Quran, with the recipe of Iman, asks us to come together and also keep doing salih deeds. Not only by being together as individuals as well, wherever we are, we must do solid deeds so that our Iman becomes strengthened and our self is developed. And the signs of that self appear before us in our conduct because we start manifesting various divine attributes in our conduct. These thoughts arise because of the time scale involved in manifesting the results of human deeds under the law of requital and the law of respite. Human beings desire quick results for their decisions and actions in life, and these do manifest in the physical world very quickly. For example, in order to destroy a country, a powerful nation can use weapons of mass destruction and the country can be left in ruins in a matter of days to weeks. But construction is very difficult. For example, when we are educating and training people and helping them in self-development, it takes years and years of effort. Overcoming this tendency to go for quick results is part of our training on Sirat-e-Mustaqim. When we overcome this tendency, then it serves as a sign of development of one aspect of ourselves. Construction always takes time. Education and training of a nation is a long and painstaking task spread over many years. Overcoming that tendency to look for quick results is part of the sign of a developed self, that it is on the right lines. And wherever we are confronted with this situation, we should immediately keep the Quranic instruction in our mind that not to be impatient, but to steadfastly pursue our path. Then the Quran asks them to look at history and see for themselves events from the past where people did suffer at the hands of the law of requital. Here the Quran has also asked us to think carefully about the behavior of people when they do not wish to learn a lesson from the past. Most people do not seriously think that past events apply to them and that they can be subjected to the same ruin which visited nations of the past. Continuous monitoring is part of being on this path. Allah then reminds us that Al-Haq has the right from Allah and needs to be accorded the respect which it deserves. We need to go through it and then decide whether it has what it claims to have, and if we accept Iman, then we need not hold on to our doubts and suspicions. Doubts and suspicions arise only initially, but as we progress and our self develops with the results, the manifestation of the results, we understand that our path is the right one and doubts and suspicions disappear. Dealing with these doubts and suspicions effectively using the Quranic teaching is a sign of a developed self. And this is one aspect of it. In order to benefit from its teaching, we need to remove everything that falls within Islam. In contrast to the human world, the Quran offers the blueprint of a program for the system of Deen, and together with this, it provides firstly the guidance of Iman and Saleh deeds, secondly, instructs us to come together to form a Jamaat, thirdly, to stay united and deal with the challenges of life together in the light of the Quran, and no differences. That is important because as our understanding goes higher and as we come to grips with the values of the Quran, our differences must disappear. This is how we learn to apply the Quranic values in our daily lives. Now we go to next three verses, 1095 to 97, weaknesses of the human psyche explained. وَلَا تَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ فَتَكُونَ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ حَقَّتْ عَلَيْهِمْ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ وَلَوْ جَاءَتْهُمْ كُلُّ آيَاتٍ حَتَّى يَرَوُا الْعَذَابَ الْأَلِيمَ. And do not be like those people who keep on falsifying the laws of Allah. If you also turn out to be like them, then you too will suffer loss. We have explained these facts in a perspicuous way, and in their support have also provided reasoning, evidence, and historical facts. From this, every person possessing intellect and wisdom will reach this conclusion that there should be no hesitation or delay in acceptance of these facts. But those people who have made themselves like this, that there can simply be no influence of reasoning and evidence on them, i.e., those who remain entrenched in their stubbornness and do not make use of intellect and reasoning, they will never accept Iman, no matter how many clear and open signs may appear before them, until the time that they witness the hell of destruction in recompense for their deeds before them with their own eyes. They will accept Iman at that time just like Pharaoh. All this takes place according to our law. Now, going through some details of these verses, 1095 to 97, being aware of the consequences of our thoughts and deeds is part of our self-development process. Continuing from the previous verse, Allah has cautioned us to remain aware of our thoughts so that we do not in any way reject the guidance of the Quran, and this includes the creation of doubts in our heart and mind, and then to start pursuing these which will weaken our resolve. And in these things, we should keep in mind all the time the hereafter as well, and have a long-term objective of staying on Sirat al-Mustaqim, because this is the shortest path to success. And because it is based on Iman and Amal Saleh, the signs will appear before us as we proceed together. As we know, the Quran wishes us to create a very high degree of resolve for Deen after accepting Iman. And if we fail in this regard, then it cautions us that lack of progress on this path will be a strategy resulting in immense loss. One point which needs a careful reflection is that nothing in the world remains static, more so in the human, cognitive, and physical domains. The status quo is not an option for a student of the Quran who has selected his objective to be the system of Deen. Here the Quran has used Allah, not Rabb, i.e. encompassing all the divine attributes so that we do not slow down or think, I have done enough, because then events will overtake us and we will lag behind. And we can see the evidence of this, that for such a long time, for centuries, Muslims haven't benefited from the Quran, and as a result, we can see the evidence of it that they are lagging far, far behind. Further reflections. In the next verse, 1096, we are presented with the evidence of those who reject Rububiyyat and think that this life has no meaning and purpose. People with this kind of mindset are not going to have Iman. 2 points here for use are, firstly, to recognize these people around us and note their weaknesses and limitations. And secondly, to not be like them and to avoid those acts of theirs which do not get approval from the Quran. Then the Quran sums it up by saying that when man rejects the signs of Allah and thinks there is no accountability in this life and he can do whatever he desires, then the outcomes of his deeds are bound to catch up with him at some point in life. The same is true regarding nations, though it takes longer. At an individual level, results are also dependent on man-made systems, to what extent these permit evil to prosper. Because if the system is evil around us, then only evil will prosper, because evil will support evil. However, the effects of these deeds cannot be taken away from the consequences to the self and with death the decision becomes clear about the hereafter. Here the Quran makes it clear to us that when the results of our deeds catch up with us, then this cannot be reversed, and accepting Iman under the threat of imminent death is meaningless. And this requires our pause and reflection, particularly when we are sharing this message with others. We should clearly tell them that death is a fact of life, and we are never going to come back to this life again. And once the time is gone, that's it. We have lost that time. Time as a resource will not be available to us because life is moving forward. 1098, nations can recover within the time of respite. And I'll go to the meanings. The evidence for this claim of ours is available from history itself, that no nation has existed which prior to destruction had accepted Iman during the state of peace. And in this way, due to the advantage of the benefits of its Iman, remained protected from destruction. If there has been any exception to this, then it was the nation of Yunus which accepted Iman before the arrival of the punishment. So we removed this azab away from them, which would have humiliated them in the world. So Quran over here says that there is an example of a nation which recovered, which returned to the laws of Allah and allowed them to enjoy the bounties of life for a stated term. Further reflections on this verse. Next, the Quran places an important question before us from history, that there was no nation which accepted Iman which would have benefited them. This means Iman in Allah benefits nations. Then it cites an exception of the people of Yunus, hence the name of this surah, who did accept Iman, and as a consequence they mended their ways and thus benefited from making this choice. So this is a great, in a way, glad tiding as well, that nations can recover if they haven't crossed the final threshold of self-destruction. An important point noted here by the Quran in the light of the law of requital is that nations suffer due to the wrong path which they insist on following, and despite warnings on the way by their messengers, they do not accept Iman and consequently reach a point of no return, just like Pharaoh. However, it then quotes from history that until the time that the nation of Yunus did not change their path in life, they were headed for destruction. And that point we should keep it in mind, that only if we do taba wa islaha, as Quran says, come back and then take the right path, take the direction of the correct path. Once they accepted Iman and did good deeds, and as a consequence benefited from these, they did not suffer from any azab. This life of theirs continued for a stated period as per the law. Stated period over here means that if we are following the right path, then of course there is no destruction. We will live a life of peace and also of security and tranquility and prosperity. So stated term over here means that once they also left this path, of course, then they were also on the path of self-destruction. 1099, coming to grips fully with human choice and intent is part of our psychological development. وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَآمَنَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ كُلُّهُمْ جَمِيعًا فَأَنْتَ تُكْرِهُ النَّاسَ حَتَّى يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. This is all because our law of Mashiach is that adopting the path of kufr or iman has been left to the decision of man himself. We do not intervene at all in this, and we can see the evidence of it. Allah does not interfere in our affairs. Of course, He functions, He works, His work is done through the hands of Jamaat Momineen. If we were to intervene, then we would have also have created man constrained, just like the other things of the universe have been created constrained, and which remain busy functioning according to our established laws. So over here, Quran is making absolutely clear, and that man is given choice and intent, whereas other things other than man do not have choice and intent, and they follow Allah's laws. For example, clouds, for example, earth, gravity, for example, sun. So all these are signs from Allah that they don't have a choice and intent. Animals don't have choice and intent, but human beings are the only ones who have choice and intent. And we should come to grip with this fact in order to get the maximum benefit from the Quran. In this case, all human beings on planet Earth would have been Momineen, i.e. no freedom to choose. So a lot of time our frustration comes from not fully understanding this important aspect of human choice and intent. We think the way I have made a choice, others also are making a choice, and they will be influenced by my making the right choice. It doesn't work like that. Hence, when our law is this, that in the matter of kufr and iman, human choice and intent has been given total freedom, then, O Rasool, how can you compel people that they should all of them accept iman? And it looks like from this verse, this was the initial stages where the wahi of Allah was coming, and then subsequently, once Jamaat Momineen was well established, then there are no verses like that anywhere, because then the system had started taking shape. Further reflections. A powerful message is conveyed for our guidance that by giving choice and intent to man, it is ensured that no one can influence it except the individual himself. As students of the Quran, we should come to grips with this evidence-based reality of human existence. This is so strict that Allah himself will never ever interfere in this. Keeping this in mind, we can also observe the conduct of others, their behavior. It is not a question of somebody says, I have become a Muslim, I have got Iman. We have to see people and see our own self as well in terms of our own conduct and behavior, whether it is in line with the Quran or not. This means that firstly, we should be very pleased with our own self that having come to the Quran through our own choice, we have gone through a paradigm shift in our outlook about our existence and transformed ourselves. Secondly, we should feel relieved that we do not have any responsibility to try to convince any other human being to come to this path if he or she does not wish to. We should not even waste an iota of our time and a thought on this. We should be very clear, whether these are our children, our families, friends, and the wider public, that we cannot change anyone unless they wish to change themselves. The control to their own transformation and change and choices is within them. So this is part of understanding the Quran. We only share the message of Allah with them exactly as He has shared it with us, without putting any pressure on us to accept it forcibly. And this is important, that Allah has not forced us to become Momineen. This is our choice. And if differences arise, that is again our issue, that we have let those differences arise because we are not consulting the Quran the way it should be consulted. And these are important points, that we should come to the reality of our own choice and intent, our own decision making, our own individual accountability. This verse points to another aspect of being on this path, as the messenger was keen for others to adopt this guidance at an early stage in his striving on this path. He is guided by Allah, and then he understands human psyche through reflection and evidence, and moves on to the next stage of the self's development. So overcoming this tendency of thinking that we can convince others, and the independence of human choice and intent, this particular trait is very important, because once we have understood this and we have come to that grip, then a calmness will come on our inner self, and that is a sign of a developing self. 1099, we come to grips with the reality of our existence through different stages progressively. We may say, what is the harm in thinking like this? The harm is that our self will not move to the next stage of its development, which can only take place if it overcomes this inner dissonance and becomes free from the self-created handicap of forcing others to become Muslims. It's a very important point which I thought through very carefully, that if we do not come to grips with the human choice and intent and understand what a human being is, that means we haven't understood our own self. And if we haven't understood our own self, we haven't come to grips with our own self and its inner psyche, then how are we going to understand others? Because others have same one. So it is important that we should come to grips with human psyche on this aspect of choice and intent in the light of this verse and in the practical sphere. It is not otherworldly. We can see the evidence of it. Evidently against the Quranic injunction of 2:256, i.e. no compulsion in Deen. If you remember this verse, that La ikraha fi Deen, Quran has very clearly said that both paths of life have been made clear to you. Now it is your choice which one you wish to follow. Implicit in this verse is another aspect of understanding for us, that why did Allah not create everyone as Momin, and hence there would have been no fasad or bloodshed on the planet. And that is another very important point. We have gone over some of its aspects, but I thought just to reiterate it. The answer to this needs to be explored and comprehended by every member of TOLU-E-ISLAM, as in this lies the satisfaction that we are on that path which is defined by the Quran. If that would have been the case, we wouldn't be sharing this presentation, and there would have been human beings running around without clothes on the face of the earth, just like sheep, cattle, and other animals. I added a bit of humor here. If we didn't have choice and intent, then there would have been no decision making here. There had been no creativity on the planet Earth. We would have behaved just like other animals. So what was the purpose of that? Because other animals are for human beings. And these human beings who would have been running around without choice and intent, what was their use? And Allah's everything is haq, as we know. Do we wish to be like them? And then second point is, rather than appreciating that we have choice and intent, if we get worried, we get frustrated with all the facade and trouble and chaos going on in the world, for which Allah has provided us guidance as well. And then He Himself has said that I will give you help. Then rather than looking at these aspects, if we get frustrated and hopeless despite having the Quran, then there is some issue with us. Do we wish to be like them? Don't we have many like them on the planet with clothes on who simply do not know how to use their choice and intent, and as a result have nothing in the hereafter, for which this is the first stage of the self's development? This is a stark reality before us. If we have come to the Quran, then we must get maximum benefit out of it and try to work for the system of Deen continuously. Next verse. 10:100, importance of using akal to acquire iman. Akal means intellect and reasoning. وَمَا كَانَ لِنَفْسٍ أَن تُؤْمِنَ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَيَجْعَلُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Remember, no individual can accept iman until he does not reach the correct conclusion after using his intellect and reasoning according to our law. Hence, this is our law that the matter cannot become clear to those people who do not make use of their intellect and reasoning. They remain in a state of confusion. Further reflections on this verse, after making it clear that by being given choice and intent, man is completely free from any external compulsions and is left alone, so that he can make his own choices in this life and then live by the consequences of his chosen path. In fact, it is an exciting path. It is an exciting life if we are fully aware of choice and intent and have the guidance of the Quran with us, and then knowing that Allah is there to give us protection according to His laws. Then that is the pleasure of living. Of course, at this stage, since we don't have Deen, we are also confronted with other problems. But at a fundamental level, we should come to grips with this issue that Quran is there to help us, and Allah is there who is everywhere to provide help according to the procedure laid down in the Quran. Then by noting Bi-Iznillah, that is, everything is according to His laws. Allah has made it clear to us that everything follows evidence-based laws. These laws are not abstract. They are not something which is not visible. For example, law of respite and law of requital, we are fully familiar that it works in our life. And if we use our intellect and reasoning, then we can easily figure this out. For example, in verse 45:22, we have gone over it a number of times before. وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. That Allah has created heaven and the earth as haq, for constructive results, for positive outcome, so that every nafs, وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ, every nafs, every human self which has choice and intent, is held responsible for what they do, بِمَا كَسَبَتْ, so that whatever deeds they do, and it's a fair enough, it's a justice, that whatever we do should have consequences. وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ, and nobody is treated unjustly. So very clearly Quran says that if there is injustice in your world, that means your deeds are wrong. If your deeds are good, there cannot be injustice. It is made clear that each self is accountable for his or her deeds in this life, and the system of accountability is so precise that no one can be treated unjustly. This aspect is further elaborated when the Quran tells us that its guidance cannot be imposed on anyone. It is simply our choice whether to follow it or not. However, it asks us to at least reject it after understanding its importance and not reject it without even looking into its outline. More reflections on this verse. In the second part of the verse, another interesting point is revealed about the human psyche when it is stated, وَيَجْعَلُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. He will place doubt in those who will not use aql. Over here, though Allah is related to himself, but it means is that if you do not use your aql, if you do not use your reasoning, then you will not be able to understand it. And Quran is from someone, Allah, who has infinite intellect and infinite reasoning, and he's the one who is creating these laws. Then how can we expect ourselves to understand his book? A being like that, how can we understand it without using our intellect? That is the purpose for which intellect is given to us. When human beings do not use their intellect the way it is meant to be used, then it has consequences for them. The meaning of our rijs is doubt, hesitation, anxiety, the matter not being clear and not being in focus. It also means contamination and dirt, harsh noise, etc. It is also used in connection with intoxication and gambling. And we know it. We have gone over these points many times, but it is good to keep reiterating them, keep repeating them so that these get into our mind for all times. Becoming aware of this aspect of our intellectual and reasoning process is important in order to make decisions which lead to living a successful life as defined by the Quran. The point being made is that for ourselves to be of use to the system of Deen, it needs to come to grips with the finer details of the system, and hence ourselves needs to acquire knowledge of the guidance of Allah and then gradually let its understanding become part of our intellect. See how beautifully Quran is training ourselves. Quran is actually teaching us, training us, and then asking us to experience it in our own life and practice it, and then see how the results of our self-development, manifest in the outer world. Verse 101, Iman gives access to a new world. قُلْ أَنْظُرُوا مَاذَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا تُغْنِي الْآيَاتُ وَالنُّذُرُ عَنْ قَوْمٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. I'll go to the meanings. The correct technique to employ intellect and reasoning is that man should dispassionately study the outer universe through deep reflection and then observe what law is working in it. Therefore, O Rasool, say to them, reflect on the outer universe and the communal life of man himself. You will find great signs of the reality in these. But these signs of the path and awareness of omens of destructions cannot provide any benefit to that nation which has already decided that we are not going to accept this law as being true. Because they are not using their intellectual reasoning. They think that this life is meaningless and they can do whatever they like. Further reflections on verse 101. This verse reminds us again about the outer physical, visible part of the universe and tells us that do not content yourself with remaining static at one point. Continue to reflect on it and explore it with a view to discover more. Verse 41-53 invites us to make it part of our psyche, where the Quran says, سَنُرِيهُمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. Soon will we show them our signs in the outer regions of the universe and in their own selves until it becomes manifest to them that this is al-Haq. We have gone through a number of aspects of human psyche, and we can see that what is pointed in the Quran is absolutely true. And same goes for the outer universe. We can see that mankind has explored the outer universe quite a lot. As students of the Quran, we have seen the evidence of this within ourselves and also in the physical world. We need to continue sharing it with the people around us and beyond, because that helps us to develop ourselves. We will only pass it on to others after we have understood it, and then we are in a position to explain it to others. If we haven't understood it, then urge will never come within our heart to pass it on to others. And secondly is once we have become beneficiaries of this and the transformation which takes place within our inner self, then we can pass it on to others through our own experience as well. If we do not feel a need for it, then we should create a need just like the way we create desires for the needs of our families, etc. Overcoming this tendency to do nothing on this path is part of the process of self-development. Continuing with more reflections, then the Quran provides us with guidance by stating that the acquisition of Iman is intrinsically linked to a number of things, and these include 2 points noted here. Firstly, all these signs within the human self and in the physical world are ignored by many people, and even if they are recognized, they do not wish to bring about any change within their own selves. They feel no desire or need for this. And this is important because Quran is not talking about otherworldly things, that something roundabout will happen and then you will enter the life of the hereafter. It is telling us continuously that the change which you will experience by following the Quran will be very tangible, and it will manifest through your own outlook, vision, and your conduct and behavior with others. And you will understand your own inner self better than what it was before coming to the Quran. Secondly, they do not take notice of any warning, as they do not wish to stop from following their desires, i.e., they do not wish to bring about any change in the pattern of their lives. Now, let us go to the last verse of this presentation, 102. Deeds need to be given time to materialize their effects. فَهَلْ يَنْتَظِرُونَ إِلَّا مِثْلَ أَيَّامِ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ قُلْ فَانْتَظِرُوا إِنِّي مَعَكُمْ مِنَ الْمُنْتَظِرِينَ. Those people who adopt this kind of path, what can be said about them other than that they remain waiting for this, that history should repeat itself. And whatever has happened to previous nations, the same should happen to them. O Rasool, say to these people that if this is what it is, you wait. I will wait with you, so that the results become established and manifested, and in this way you reach the final point of certainty. Verse 10, 102, Allah's laws are firmly established. This verse summarizes the previous verses following the destruction of Pharaoh and telling us that Bani Israel moved on to the next stage of their life, i.e. in the direction of establishing Deen. Events of the past do help to remind others, but more than that, we as students of the Quran should keep in mind and never slow down on this path. Seeing the apparent success of man-devised systems, especially the power structure, thoughts may arise in our minds that this appears to be an almost impossible task. But Allah reminds us that His laws keep doing their job, even if the results are not yet visible in the physical world. Just feel the power and precision in these words of the Quran, Ayyamil Ladina Khalaw min Qablihim, the days of the people who passed away before them. Final reflections of this talk. Then the Quran asks us to declare convincingly to others, Qul fantaziru inni ma'akum minal muntazirin. Say, wait you then, for I too will wait with you. This declaration of ours is based on evidence from the Quran. And this is important that we should acquire that kind of an understanding in view of our own conduct, the changes within us through the conviction developed through the Quran, and by doing salih deeds and by coming together and removing these differences, that we have to give time for the law of requital to manifest its results and consequences. Because while Momineen are doing their best on this Sirat al-Mustaqim and enhancing their understanding and by coming together and removing their differences, the other world, which is not following the laws of Allah, are going to go down. The decline sets in, and we can see that decline in the outer world. So over here, what we need to do is not to give up and keep enhancing our understanding. And we have seen that how much work has yet to be done before coming to grips with the system of Deen. This firmness and resolve becomes created within each one of us once we have truly made Iman part of our psyche. And part of this self-development process is that a lot of weaknesses of ours and limitations of our psyche come out, and we have to overcome them. We have to realize that these are our weaknesses and how we're going to address them. And others have to point out as well. For example, I have certain weaknesses. If those are displayed and manifested, the other brothers and sisters have a duty to point it out to me that this is not in line with the Quran. And I should not mind as well, because aim is not about my becoming sensitive to this. It's not my own ego which is at stake. It is the problems in the world at which we should keep an eye. It is about those yatim and miskeen. It is about that injustice which is done in the world. It is about carrying out those duties and responsibilities which Allah has taken on himself. So we should take our own ego out of it, because part of this training is to remove that egotism, which is by default within each one of us and which we have now overcome. It takes time, and when this firmness of resolve enters our hearts and minds and brings these words to our lips, we see the two paths of life clearly demarcated. And in this, one of the important things is that we should be very, very bold enough and courageous enough to accept our faults, accept our mistakes. We can make minor errors of omissions and commissions on this path. And when these are pointed out, we should accept those, apologize, and move on. And make a promise, commitment to Allah that we will not do it again. And keep reminding ourselves that we are not going to do it. As more people with such resolve join in, then things start to take shape. And with that, we come to the end. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. We should keep it in mind that this is also part of self-development process, that when we have understood, we have gone through these presentations, we have made these part of our psyche, then when we share it with others because we are convinced that we have benefited from what is noted here from the Quran, then it helps to develop ourselves. And it also builds up our courage. Thank you.